do believe Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, Forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. What's going on here? Welcome, everyone. Instagram land. Hello. All social media should be rolling. Welcome, everyone. Again, this is the IBSI Weekly Forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. We come together every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern. I'm joined by my wonderful Miss co-host and board member and Speakers Bureau Chief and all around everything, Miss Olga Mashray Washington. Hello, Olga. How are you?
Hello, sir. Hello, everybody. Good evening.
Now, Olga, I have Clubhouse up, and I believe that we're there too. Joshua's usually co-piloting that. So if you have your other phone there, go on there as well, so that they can hear. Now, I believe they can hear on Clubhouse, but I think that I have to do something. I'm still learning this new system here, and I'll figure out a way that I can make sure that you are a moderator. And boom, there we go, just like that. Invite. There you go. All right, I think we're good to go. All right, so welcome, everyone. Glad that you are here with us again. Each Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, we come together. The Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel leads what's called the Forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. We have discussions on so many different topics. They can deal with culture, music, religion, as pertains to Israel, Africa, and Black America, all these different topics here. We have some laid out here for you on today. This is, I believe, our third week. Oh, here we go. Now I'm hearing some echo. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can stop the echo there. I think that's what that is there. Okay, all right. This is our the third week in this newer format, meaning we are streaming on all of our social media. So if you go to ibsi.org and as well as on Instagram. Now, Instagram, that's my Instagram account. We're not actually on the IBSI's Instagram, although we'll share it there. We'll tag it towards the end. I think that's the best way to do it. We're still figuring all that out. I got a staff that helps me kind of work through all those different things. So we started just a few weeks ago. We were on Clubhouse when we first began. Not when we first began, but about a year ago or so, we did Clubhouse for a little while. We weren't doing it as much, just kind of here and there. But we as a staff talked about last spring that we would begin that again, but we would actually do it on this restream. So we are on our YouTube page, our Facebook, our Twitter, and on Instagram, my Instagram there, Dumisani6, as well as Clubhouse. So welcome, everybody. We're glad that you're here. We'll have some people kind of help us there on the Clubhouse chat as well. People they kind of want to chime in. We have some topics that are here for us today. Last week we touched on, I might touch on a little bit what happened on last week, but let me say this real quickly. I had a couple of conversations with a couple of pastors over the last week or so. So schedule wise, every Monday we do this forum. We open it up so people can join and check out what's going on, what the work of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel is. The information that they can access on our website and social media and all of those things, as well as our peace initiative. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, in a moment. But also, we have on every third Tuesday, unlike this, it's not streamed, what's called our IBSI Pastors Present. And this is for pastors, Christian pastors, leaders, and or you don't have to be necessarily a pastor. You can be somebody interested. We deal with different biblical or geopolitical or justice subjects in those things. That is not streamed. So for you pastors or other Christian leaders, whatever, who want to be a part of that, we got a couple of messages about that. That's every third Tuesday. So I believe the next third Tuesday is August the 15th. And actually the topic will be part 2 of what we talked about, the Acts chapter 2, the Jews of Africa, Asia, and Europe. So those of you who had asked about that, just go ahead. If you want more information, you can click on ibsi.org. You can email us at ibsi-now.org and get that information. We can send you that Zoom link as well. So these here, IBSI is not a Christian organization. I am a pastor, and most of us who serve here are Christians, but it is not a Christian organization per se. It is more of a geopolitical one. We deal with issues of, obviously, in terms of combating anti-Semitism, combating racism, strengthening the tie between Africa and Israel, the Black and Jewish communities. I will often say when we say Black and Jewish, we're not talking about necessarily the exterior. We know that Jewish people come in black, white, and brown, all shape sizes. So we're not saying that Jews cannot be Black people. We're talking about now more of a cultural and ethnic heritage thing that we can kind of unpack a little bit more too. There's so much to talk about, which is why we come together each week and try to unpack several different things. Olga, you're doing all right today, ma'am?
Yes, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm used to, well, it's usually the co-pilot at first is you're not your better half. He's not your better, you're the better half. So I want to call him the lesser half. But I mean he's the guy.
Mm,
This time he's got the boys and you are with us today. So glad to see you, ma'am.
I'm happy to be with everybody and also happy to start if we're co-piloting, what are we? We're flying a plane. Happy to start with the beginning.
Well, it's a just a heads up, everyone. So each Wednesday, each Monday, again 8 p.m. we do this. I will actually be in Israel. God save the same next Monday. So Olga will actually be heading everything up, possibly with Joshua, depending on what one of their aunties, one of the boys' aunties, can actually watch over them and everything. So they will be. So don't miss next week. It's going to be amazing as well. Looking forward to that. I will try to tune in, although whatever time that is. I guess it's like 3 o'clock in the morning that time. I'm usually up anyway, so I'm walking to the hotel. Maybe I can kind of listen in and everything. So, all right, everybody, we have a few topics we want to get into on today. And one of those at the top of it, again, Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. I would do the resetting the room type of thing. But if you're on the screens, if you're seeing this on Facebook, again, I want to remind everybody, whether you're on Clubhouse, whether you are on Facebook, YouTube, or whatever you are on, whatever different platforms you need to access, you absolutely can. I will show you a little video clip a little bit later on this evening. So those of you who are on both Instagram and on Clubhouse, you won't see it. You will hear the audio, I'll tell you what's going on. But if you ever want to check that out, just go to our YouTube page, Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. Same thing with Facebook, same thing with Twitter as well. And we're not on LinkedIn yet. I was saying that, but we just started our LinkedIn page, and I think you have to have like 200-300 members. We just opened it up. So once we get more followers on there, then we can kind of stream on Instagram as well. So one of the first things I want to touch on, first of all, Olga, I'll hand this over to you. You know, of course, you introduced us to the venerable Pastor Shagan. And Olga, please say his surname, the real surname for me, please, ma'am.
So his full name is Olusegun, and then his last name is Olinapikan.
Olinapikan.
And I might be mispronouncing it because he's Nigerian, but I'm close.
I always tell people Pastor Shagan is based in Florida, in South Africa, but he's all over. He actually is from Nigeria. When our IBSI ambassadors, if you don't know about our peace initiative, just go to ibsi.org. Peace is an acronym that stands for Plan for Education, Advocacy, and Community Engagement. We were graced to be able to launch that initiative last fall, in which we recruited young Black men and women from across the country, different parts of the city, different parts of the country, different cities, on what we call a 9-month journey of discovery and travel. We each month came together unpacking different topics, and we made 2 overseas trips. The first one was to South Africa. December was the motherland, and June was the Holy Land. We went to South Africa. Olga's home in December, and then we just came back several weeks ago from Israel in June. Amazing. Again, to all of our supporters, the donors, coalition partners, everyone who helped make that peace initiative the inaugural journey and a success. Thank you for all of your help. We have now launched the IBSI pastors version of that. That's another thing. However, one of the things that we had the privilege of doing, I'm just clicking on this on the Instagram thing because it's in front of me right there. We met Pastor Shagan in Stanton, South Africa. He is over the Africa-Israel Chamber of Commerce. No, I'm saying that right. Yeah. He has several different branches from that tree, right? There's different things that he does that are part of ministry and ministry preparation. And it's amazing that not only were we able to meet him and spend some time about what he's doing, the vision God's given him, and what he's been doing both as a pastor, as a business leader, but every other year, I think it's biannually, he hosts a Africa Leadership Summit in Jerusalem. So our Israeli friends, I will be, again, God save the same, in Jerusalem in a few days for that conference. Just about 6 days on the ground. I'll have to come right back to the States. But Olga, I want you to tell us a little bit about Pastor Shagan, a little. You introduced us to him, right? And I could say some more things. Just a wonderful man. We've already been kind of working on some different projects together. But tell us, Olga, why it was so important for you that when we brought our ambassadors to South Africa, of the many things, and it's a huge country, there's so much to see. So obviously you have to pick those things that you feel are the most impactful. Why did you pick Pastor Shagan in the Africa-Israel Chamber of Commerce?
Well, it was important for me to ensure that because IPSI is an organization that just doesn't talk the talk, but also walks the walk, then is about making sure that there's practical consequences to what we do, that we were to partner up with similar organizations. And Pastor Shagan, for as long as I've known him since I was a little bitty girl, he has been somebody who has been about doing the word of God, about practically empowering people, and not only empowering people. He's an example of Psalms 2, when the psalmist wrote, or the Lord wrote in relation, the Lord speaking through the psalmist, I should say, said, ask of me and I will give you the nations. And so Pastor Shagan has had a heart for the nation. Initially, it was about developing African nations. And then he recognized that if Africa is going to fully develop, if African nations are going to fully reach their potential, there has to be a connection with Israel. And Genesis 12:3, I will bless those who bless Israel. This is one of the offshoots in relation to actually making that happen. And so meeting Pastor Shagan for the IPSI ambassadors for me was a dream come true, in a sense, in that it showcased several things. One of them, here was an African on the African continent, showing how Africans in the diaspora were a bridge in relation to the empowerment of the African continent, as well as showcasing the practical link to Israel. And that's part of what we as IPSI are about. So the conversation that we had in Sandton, him then sharing the vision of ALS and showcasing how our IPSI ambassadors, even as they continue to do their work here in their TESFA centers, how they can't forget about their roots on the continent and always ensuring that there is that link to Israel. And
I was a so as you know, Olga, that the evening that we actually met Pastor Shagan, I wasn't feeling 100%, and I stayed back at the hotel. Was very, very frustrated. I wanted to just go. I said, okay, well, you need to be ready for the next day. Don't mess everything up. And so I got the report back, and among the many things that I heard was from several of the ambassadors that when Pastor Shagan, to your last point, began to talk about not just the obligation, the connection in terms of the African diaspora with the continent, right? And I'll maybe say some more about that as well. But as he shared the biblical illustration of Joseph and his brothers, right? That Joseph sold into slavery by his brothers. We know that the president of Uganda, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, offered an official apology to the Africans in the diaspora, particularly in America, for the African leaders, chiefs and kings. He said lead their role in slavery. And it was very emotional for a lot of different people, depending on what your mindset is, which I might have to touch on that again. You might be a person, you might be African and say, that's not a big deal to me. And it may not be to you, but for someone else, it may really resonate. A couple of our ambassadors in particular became very emotional. Describe that, Olga, when you saw that happening. What for you, and I know we had a similar thing at your father's church several years ago when we had the Heritage Day, right? Something like that. Olga, for you as someone who's from South Africa, right? You are a daughter of Africa. When you see Black Americans respond in that way emotionally when it comes to Africa, what does that mean for you?
So I do have to admit at first that it's been a journey for me. As you've already mentioned, I'm not an American, and South Africa is my home. I've become an American because of your son. And initially it was, and I will humbly say, I think I do represent a lot of Africans in my generation. Initially, there's like this weirdness as to, okay, who are these African Americans coming to the continent? This is the motherland, and not really, like, we don't understand it. But what I've been able to learn, and what was so beautifully demonstrated by Pastor Shagan and the team that evening, is that there is this long lost connection that exists and by God's grace is being rebuilt with regards to our brothers and sisters that were taken away from the continent many, many centuries ago. And so the ability to be like, okay, you're not just weird because you don't really know about Africa, or you're trying to figure out your roots for Africa. This really is your home. And for us as Africans, understanding what that means to African Americans and seeing them feel as if they're connected to us, and that we're not just this far distant, I don't want to say we're in a museum, but that we're actually brothers in the literal sense, brothers and sisters in the literal sense. And if I may add to that, recognizing both as somebody from the continent and as well as somebody who's now living in the diaspora, that there is a responsibility to each other with where we live. Nobody's better than the other person. Everybody has got the gifts and the talents, and also has been, even though it's been a painful journey for the African Americans, everybody is where God wants them to be. And so now it's a question of, now that I'm here, how do I then build my family? And by family, I mean the extended family. So yes, there's a story of Joseph and the reconnection with his brothers, and a powerful moment in that reconnection was when Pastor Shagan actually apologized. You refer to what the president of Uganda did. He also did that on a small scale, and for many of the IPSI ambassadors, for them seeing that, and even for me seeing it, like, wait, all that they need, even though I wasn't a partaker in the slave trade, my ancestors, unfortunately, to some degree, did play a part in that. And so for me to extend and say, I'm sorry for the role that my ancestors played in relation to your suffering, and that we're still connected, we're still family, was amazing. And I think for many of them, what it seemed to me was that there was a switch that went off that said, not only is this my home, but you want me back. And I recognize that I too have a stake in this. Like, I too can contribute. I too belong. Even though I may not know where geographically on the continent I belong, but I still belong as a person, as a descendant of the soil. I remember several years ago, me questioning and saying, okay, Lord, why am I in exile, quote unquote? Somebody like Nehemiah. So yes, I didn't come here as a result of the slave trade, but there's many Africans who have come here because their parents brought them here, or circumstances in Africa were not conducive for them. They're refugees, and now sitting, whether it's in the United States or elsewhere in the world, saying, why am I not home? Why am I in exile? But if somebody thinks of the story of Nehemiah, he was there, amongst other things, to get resources so that he could go back to Jerusalem and build the wall. And so the knowledge that Africans in the diaspora still have a role, a meaningful role, to build their nations, their ancestry, as well as their future, is a very, very powerful thing once they understand that.
It is, and you had said something, and so much of it is all of it, Olga, but there was something that you had said about we are where God wants us to be, and that is such a controversial, if I can use that point for some, right? So I want to relate this to those of you who are, especially on Clubhouse, you see this forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. We're talking about Pastor Shagan, who's the leader of the Africa-Israel Chamber of Commerce. I'll be headed to the Africa Leadership Summit in Jerusalem in just a few days. And I'll get to even how that happened as well, just give kind of how he shared with me the vision God had given him. But you're saying about where we're supposed to be. As you can see in our nation, unfortunately, due to whether it's political manipulation or media, those types of things, the issue of slavery is probably more talked about now than probably in the last 5 or 6 years. You have the whole curriculum thing in Florida, right? They have a Black American history curriculum that there was controversy about what was in the curriculum or wasn't in the curriculum, that type of thing. And the reason I'm saying that at this point here is that we were talking about, and you just referenced, the biblical narrative. One of the things that I shared, I think, with some of the pastors that we met with, and then another group, I can't remember exactly at this moment now, but I was saying that in order to understand this perspective, then you'd have to see it biblically. And not I'm not saying that as a, for those of you who may not be religious, you may not be Christian, you may not be Jewish or Muslim, or you might, the scriptures may not be an important thing for you. I understand that, but I'm saying at the same time, in terms of perspective, someone said to me, I believe on the post when I posted the president of Uganda, Museveni, I think I'm saying it the right way. I hope I'm saying it right. He gave that speech about a month ago, and I posted it on my wall. And again, there's a lot of misconceptions about what people mean by that, especially Black Americans. Are you talking about reparations now? Are you talking about, is it you're hurt and you're angry with whatever they think your perspective is on it, right? And so this one person said on my wall, yes, but Black Americans are, what you say, they're strong, they something along the lines of how we've gone on and everything. And I told her, no, you have to understand, Black Americans are some of the most powerful people in the African diaspora because we are in America, the most powerful nation on the planet for the time being. We will see what's going to happen these next few years. And so we have access in a way that many in the African diaspora, including on the continent, depending on where they are, don't have. What do you mean by that? We can walk into the house, into the to the governor's mansion. We can become, senators. We can become president. We can and have not only survived but thrived in a way that would seem impossible. And for our elders, we always attributed it to God, right? This being to lift every voice and sing everything. And I was telling the person on Instagram that for me anyway, the issue wasn't so much I'm angry with somebody and the president of Uganda had to assuage that. That's not what that was. I told that wasn't the issue. That for someone else it may be different. But here was the thing for me. I said, if you understand it biblically, Joseph fared very well in the end after he was sold into slavery. He became very wealthy, very powerful. The scripture says the second in command to Pharaoh, right? So did things turn out okay for him? Sure they did, right? But his brothers still felt lower than low, right? And it did not change the fact that although he became a very powerful person, he became again a Moshiach character, if you will. Those are my Jewish brothers and sisters, a Messiah type of figure in that he winds up saving the Israelite nation. However, they were heartbroken because they realized what they had done. So the fact that he accomplished much did not change the fact that they sold their own brother into slavery. And of course, they thought he was going to get retribution, right? They're afraid, especially once Jacob died. They're like, oh my God, he's really going to let us have it right now. And Olga, when you were saying that about how everybody's where they're supposed to be, one of the things that Pastor Shagan seemed to very clearly be saying is that almost like an Esther, for such a time of this, maybe you in the African diaspora, particularly in America, can assist in the rebuilding. The other thing I love what you said, Olga, everything I love what you said, is that it's not a matter of one group being better than the other. I've watched that over the years too. I've told some younger people that I've been around the reparations debate and the immigrant debate, Black African immigrant debate, and the what they call the something born America. There's another term. I'm old. I see these terms. They weren't really used as much, right? And there's this artificial, right? I shouldn't say artificial, this rivalry. In other words, I've seen some try to stoke problems between Black Americans and Africans, right? There's already an awkwardness that might be there, but unfortunately you have some bad actors who want to, make them almost like pit them against each other, right? This is what's amazing to me, because in that story, in that narrative, the brothers were rivaling Joseph, but then they repented because of how they had treated them, because they realized they were family. And that's just something that you reminded me of, Olga, that for those who can see it in a scriptural lens, there's some truths that are in there that are so powerful, right? And I'll say this here: when Pastor Shagan dropped, here I'm making sure my producer's giving me something, make sure I'm not missing something. When Pastor Shagan mentioned to me that he started the Africa Israel Chamber of Commerce, right? Am I saying that the right way? I hope I'm saying it the right way. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They would come together, but Jerusalem was not yet on the agenda in terms of a meeting place. This was something that God had placed in his heart, but the initial part of it didn't happen until a few years ago, right before COVID, I believe, right? And I remember him saying to me, Pastor Dumisani, when we finally moved to have the conference, have the summit in Jerusalem, he said, it was not smooth. He said, it didn't just come together. He said it was a real warfare, right? It was a real, so not warfare. He was talking about somebody doing something, but he was saying there was a lot that happened that was very, very difficult for it to come together. Olga, one of the things we talk about is that there are times in terms of we're following what we believe God's plan is for us. Every once in a while, all the lights are green and everything is cool and everything's right. But generally speaking, when we step out, it's scarier, right? There's the rough patches and everything like that. One of the things I appreciate about Pastor Shagan and sharing that was that though we are going to have the conference and I'm excited to be there with them, there's a lot of sacrifices that people made to actually make the conference, make that summit a reality. And their vision of more and more Black Americans participating both there and then the Africa Agency America, that's a hub, that's a different venture that they're doing, is an exciting time. There's a what hit me, everyone, was that for Pastor Shagan, Israel is something that God placed on his heart to connect to what he was doing, and the man of God moved by faith in that direction. And just even now, just as I'm coming introduced to the work, excited to see it and grateful for Pastor Shagan's obedience in that, because in him doing that, it is opening doors for other people to be able to see some things that they hadn't seen in that way. Now, Olga, you can't go this time. I wanted you to be able to. I know hopefully next time you'll be able to. But you've been obviously as the leader of Club Z, the CEO, COO, the COO of Club Z, and shout out to my good friend Miss Masha. I've known Masha for like 12 years, and I her last name. And that's when I should talk like, 'cause my name is Dumisani, so you can say Dumisani. But shout out to Masha and Club Z, the wonderful work they're doing. Olga's been over Club Z now, COO of Club Z for like the last year or so. She's been on staff for about longer than that, maybe 3 years or so, I think it is. Yeah.
On staff 3 years.
Yes, ma'am. So you were able to go to Club Z, go to Israel with Club Z back in the spring. No, February, was it? January?
The summer of last year with Club Z.
Summer of last year. Okay. That's how fast everything was. And then you want to get this past summer or this past month with IBSI, and hopefully again very, very soon. For those of you who don't know, Olga is also the CEO of DAISY, which is an acronym for Defend, Embrace, Invest in, and Support Israel, that's based in South Africa. It was started by her father, the Venerable Dr. Reverend Kenneth Mashwe. There, he's also a member of parliament as well as being a pastor. Her family have been leaders both in the spiritual and the political community for decades, especially at the fall of the apartheid era. Reverend Mashwe, his party, the ACDP, the African Christian Democratic Party, has been a part of South Africa politics from the beginning, including serving with and working with Nelson Mandela and the ANC, of course, all the other parties that are there. It's a parliamentary system there in South Africa like it is in Israel. So Olga comes from a very long legacy of both those who are very concerned for South Africa, concerned for the continent, their care and leadership, as well as a Christian Zionist and things. So we're just glad to have her here, and glad to have her family and everything. Olga, one last thing with that, the summit is again in a few days. I'll get there probably by Saturday morning Israel time. Hopefully I'll be able to it'd be great if you could address them even via Zoom. But just do this real quick. I know this is like spur of the moment. If you were there addressing the delegates, what's one of the topics you would want to talk to them about? You won't be able to be there this time. You'll be there in spirit. But what's one of the things that you would want those African business and church leaders to hear when you were there?
So before I answer your question, sir, I was at the very first Africa Leadership Summit, which is something that I thank God that I was able to do. I think it was way back in 2016, maybe even 15. So way, way, way back then. And yes, God willing, not only me, but the family will be able to go with the rest of the IPSI staff to the next summit. I would address the leaders, the pastors, the business people in the audience about the work that they're doing and not leaving the young people behind. My heart is young people, young people, young people. There is this move, it seems, this narrative you spoke about it briefly in relation to pitting ourselves against each other, but part of that narrative is also sowing seeds of unforgiveness, division, hatred, an oppressed victimhood mentality that just doesn't allow us to go forward. And so as these leaders have recognized the importance of having a strong relationship with Israel, on the African continent, not just in a spiritual way in terms of going to church and reading and praying for Israel, but in very, very practical ways in terms of trade and culture and various other forms, ensuring that this education, that this knowledge is also being passed to the young people. Young people being mentored by them as they have these meetings. I've been in many meetings where oftentimes I'm like, all right, I'm the youngest person in the room, and whereas that might seem great, in my opinion, it's a shortcoming that needs to be improved upon, so that our young people don't get stuck in this narrative of woe is me and it's their fault and it's the Jews, and if nobody gives me my money and reparations and I'm not going to be able to move forward. But the wisdom that comes from our elders and the wisdom that comes from this recognition about practically blessing Israel is something that needs to be passed on.
I remember we were at the
in real time.
Yes, ma'am. No, absolutely. Well, I was Toby Loeb, I believe Toby's last name is. She is an Israeli. We met her. We were with her when we were back there in June. Val and I met her for the first time back in March at the Africa Arab Israel conference hosted by the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs back in March. We posted about that and everything. Had an amazing time. The Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, jcpa.org, led by our friend, Mr. Dan Diker. Toby was there, and she spoke almost identically what you just said, Olga. She looked around the room, and there were delegates at 30 different, both African and Arab nations, Ethiopia and Kenya and Ghana. It's Saudi Arabia. UAE was there. I believe even someone from Iran was there, right? They were actually there in this conference, right? And at some point, she spoke to everyone at the Q&A, and she was saying, I'm looking around, and I'm seeing this amazing thing, but I don't see the young people, right? And she wasn't being critical in a negative way, right? She was just saying what you're just saying, right? We've got to get the young people at this table, right? What did this practically mean? I remember Joshua had said when we launched the Peace Initiative last Juneteenth, 2022, and I asked Joshua about what he foresaw. He said one day soon, he hopes that there's no need for IBSI, right? There's no need for the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel in terms of fighting anti-Semitism and Israel hatred and that type of thing, that what we've gone on and we've moved on to what we see happening. Now, don't get me wrong. There will always be, unfortunately, Israel hatred, just like there'll always be racism. Okay, until the Messiah comes, we're going to be dealing with all those things, right? However, there can be a progression, a real progression in terms of relationship. And when we look at an Abraham Accords, right? And we see, right, what is it, the first year after the Abraham Accords, the UAE and Israel did $1 billion worth of commerce, right? And we see a spreading of peace, right? You have the UAE as well as Saudi Arabia, and I believe Morocco as well, all declaring that they're removing anti-Semitic content from their curriculum, right? I told people the crazy part is in the West, anti-Semitic content is being infused in our curriculum, in our colleges and universities, a completely reverse situation that's going on. But the good news is that because this is happening in the region, and because Africa has long-standing good relationship where Israel is concerned, you're talking about a sustained peace and an expanded prosperity in the region, right? That could positively impact so many people. And as you all have heard me say before, I think maybe newer here, when it comes to the church, when it comes to Christian, I believe it's Pew, is it Pew or Gallup, did a poll a couple of years ago and said that by 2050, there will be more Christians on the African continent than anywhere else in the world. And because the birth rates in so many African nations are actually strong and growing, what you have in the West, ladies and gentlemen, are actually declining birth rates or even stagnant birth rates. Now, I'm not getting into people having babies. You have that, like Elon Musk. I'm not going to do the Elon Musk thing. I can preach about having babies, being fruitful and multiply. That's not my point. My point is that demographically, it is already a reality, right? So what does that mean? That means in a few short years, the greatest number of Christian Zionists will be in Africa. Something else that poll also measured, everyone, that not only they're the most Christians in Africa, they've also measured what they saw the most ardent Christians, the most devout in terms of their faith. This is just they just actually did the measurement. They had different rubrics that they actually used for it and everything. Again, Pew or whatever, Pew or Gallup, I think it was Pew, They're not a Christian organization. There wasn't like a religious organization trying to prove something to someone. They're just saying, hey, based on these numbers, Africa will have the most Christians. And oh, by the way, one of the largest Muslim populations as well, because the Muslim faith is growing in Africa, right? And here's what's happening. When it comes to Islamist violence, those are specific sects like the Boko Haram, like the Al Shabaab, like the some of the terror cells that are being funded mostly by Iran more than anyone else. We're not. That unfortunately is a reality in Israel and Africa. Africa is coordinating more and more with Israel, the greatest in counterterrorism, right? But what we're seeing that by and large, and we have my good friend out there, Mr. Justin Stover, out there. He's also an Israeli. He's over what's called the Ghana Israel Civil Diplomacy Alliance. That's one of our coalition partners in Israel. And they do Israel advocacy among the African Muslim population across the continent of Africa. And they find constantly that there is great love for Israel and the Jewish people throughout the African Muslim population. So I need to understand, ladies and gentlemen, some of the most fervent Israel supporters are going to be, and already are, but in terms of number, overwhelmingly in the African continent. That speaks to all kinds of things when it comes to Israel advocacy, Israel-Africa relationship, all of those things. And so, as Joshua said, I'm here for it. I'm here for it, right? Now, don't get me wrong. As a Christian, I don't want to see the Christian population dwindling and the faith watered down and dwindling in the West like it is. And unfortunately, I can get on my preacher hat and all that kind of stuff and do all that. I'm not doing that right now. What I'm saying is that what's happening where the church is concerned, there seems to be the most growth, both in Africa. And again, many of those African Christians, many of them are very, very strong Israel supporters as well. So this is going to be an interesting, few years here. The reality that my grandsons will see in their 20s and 30s and 40s is going to be much different than what everyone is seeing right here. So this is what's amazing to me as we're kind of watching that unfold. So yes, Olga, thank you. I want to no, I saw. Okay, I'm saying somebody was asking about that in the chat. That's there. The dates of the conference. It is called the Africa Leadership Summit, and it is July 31st through August the 3rd. It actually goes all the way to August the 8th because they're actually going to do a tour when the conference is over. If you want to sign up for that, it is still not too late. Well, it is too late, but if you say the Dumisani told you to go in, Pastor Shagan and the staff, they may let you go ahead. So if you are in Israel, you want to see what it's about, and you want to check out and join. It is a Christian conference. I'm letting everybody know. Anyone is welcome, but letting you know they'll be singing, they'll be praise and worship, and all of those things. It is a Christian conference that's there, African Christian leaders, both church-wise as well as business. But we are more than happy to have you there, so you can join there. Go to that website. You'll see AfricaLeadershipSummit.org, and you can join. I just see somebody who's joined us on from Ghana. This is somebody, Prince Well from Ghana. She's watching from Cameroon. Hello. How are you? So great to have you with us. And I know, again, to my Israeli friends, my African friends, I know it's like the middle of the morning there. We will start a different one. But for those of you who are just happen to be up, welcome, welcome, welcome. Glad to have you here. This is the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel and the Forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. Just as we say to our supporters and our other and throughout our networks, that it is a very interesting time that we are in. Anti-Semitism at levels really not seen before in the Western world since the Second World War. A lot of racial strife, political manipulation, all of those things. And at the same time, great opportunities for people to build real coalitions, build real, and like Olga, you were just saying in terms of the wealth part, right? Business and entrepreneurship and commerce, right? So I was talking to an Israeli friend, Oriel, shout out to Oriel. He has a wonderful gallery there in Jerusalem. I can't remember the name of it, but please forgive me, Oriel. And we were talking about the whole concept of darkness and light, that when there's a lot of light shining, that's when darkness tries to actually combat it. So actually, he said I'm saying it the wrong way. I don't want to be messing it up, but he was saying the Jewish sages say that when you're experiencing all that drama, basically, he didn't say drama, but I'm using that term. That's a sign that you're probably doing a good thing, right? That you're probably on the right path when there's a lot of dark forces trying to push back on you, trying to make you stop, right? And so I just want to, when he and I were just talking about that a couple of days ago, that Olga, I know that you know it. I mean, you've been public speaking and in ministry and in the corporate world and all of those things. And so nothing that you got easily. It
Mhm.
didn't just fall out the sky. There was a lot of application, a lot of hard work on all of those things. But I think I can speak for you and say that also the blessings of God when we persevere and everything. So you all, this is what we see where Africa and Israel are concerned. Why was I saying all that? The terrorism, right? Israel, Africa is now the number one area of global terrorism in terms of it being targeted, right? Olga, you wrote a wonderful piece. If you want to see some of the writings that we do, you all go to our website, ibsi.org, click on Africa Israel Weekly. We have articles that are there on many different topics, and also give you even a better idea of what we do at the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. And one of the things, Olga, you and I kind of collaborated on was the fact that terrorism, the global terrorism index, right, had basically it shifted from Middle East to Africa as the number one hotspot, right? So the good news is that these amazing things are happening. The dark, bad news part of it is that you have this pushing back, right? You have these emerging economies like Uganda, the emerging economies like Ethiopia, but then you have also these very difficult places where things are happening. There's a lot of fighting going on in that darkness and light. The Cattell Gallery, thank you, my producer just put it on there. The Cattell Ketel Gallery. Go check out that gallery if you're there in Jerusalem. They have amazing stuff that's there. All right, so Olga, I'm supposed to touch on this other topic here. So again, that's the Africa Israel Summit. You all, if you can join us there, join us. Go to the website. You can also get more information about what they do as well. I want to turn the corner here just for a moment, and I want to touch on this controversy of the Black American history curriculum in Florida. And I'm not going to do a whole bunch of it, but I'm going to just say this. Some of people may have been saying, why, if you're an Israel group, why do you care about that? Because ours is Israel advocacy, not just in terms of the Black community, but also those things that much of what we focus on, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call authentic history. That one of the things that causes a people to be vulnerable is the manipulation of their story, right? Whether as an individual person, a family, a nation, an ethnic group, you name it, a religion, right? If you don't know who you are from where you've descended, it makes you easily manipulated because someone can fill in that blank for you, which is why that's why Israel's enemies always trying to retell its story. Oh, settler, colonial, blah blah, all these different terms, right? Why? Because we're trying to obfuscate what's actually the truth about the nation of Israel, right? So you had the controversy that was this in a nutshell. um the 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 leaders of the education, the curriculum, I can't remember the term right now. We had different articles that we had posted about it. Had actually done its both from elementary through high school curriculum on Black American history, the African American history standard. And one of the things that got out in the media that got twisted was that somehow the people who did the curriculum were saying that slavery was a benefit to Black Americans. Now, if you heard that, if you shared that, if you believe that, there is no truth to that statement. The fact that there was a standard that was there that talked about skills that slaves acquired that they could use for their own benefit, that was true, and they gave the background to it. One of those people would be Frederick Douglass himself, who was born a slave, acquired some skills, and after his own liberation, while slavery was still a reality, he used those skills for his betterment, for his benefit, and to do things like start his own newspaper, right? So this is true, right? Unfortunately, the media took it as now. There's other people who make some criticisms about the curriculum itself. Could be stronger in this area, could be addressed this area better, that type of thing. But that it blatantly taught kids or is teaching kids that slavery was good and was good for the slaves, and that's how they learn things. That's just simply not true. And like all of the kinds of disinformation, people got so emotionally invested, right? And it was all over the media. The vice president, she said, I'm going to go down and blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there going, wow, because when you actually read, you know what's amazing? The curriculum is online, the whole PDF. You can actually find it, you can read it, right? And I was following different accounts, particularly of Black educators in Florida, right? Who are actually pushing back. Their agenda was not, let me defend Ron DeSantis and let me defend. Their thing was like, okay, here's what the curriculum actually says, right? Here's what the rubric is. Here's what the standards are. So let me say it again. It is not being taught that slavery was good because it taught the slaves skills. That's not what was actually happening, right? Now, unfortunately, by now, what I just said doesn't matter. For some, I'm lying, right? That's no, sir. We gonna rise up. Okay, you know what? I'm all for rising up. I'm just gonna rise up for nothing, right? Since I'm a little older now, right? I'm gonna be a firebrand too, but I don't just jump because somebody say hi hi, and I don't say hi and somebody say jump, right? I want to see and investigate, and that was one of the things. Olga, you and I were just talking a moment ago about the slave narrative and that type of thing, and this is one of the examples that we were saying is that because for some it is still an open wound, whether it's slavery, whether it's Jim Crow. And I'm not talking about, remember, and please, people need to hear me. Traumatic things, even in someone's past, they can still elicit emotion, but emotion cannot dictate where you go. The emotions tell you what you're feeling. Like the Joseph thing, Joseph was so mad at his brothers, he began to terrorize them. He accused them of being spies. Go get your brother. He almost forgot about his father. His first question wasn't, well, how is daddy? His first thing was like, oh, payback is a dog. Let me mess with these dudes' minds, right? Why? Because emotionally, when he saw his brothers, he was like, yeah, I remember, how you like me now type of thing, right? Once he got emotionally convicted as he saw his brothers crying, he began to cry and he realized that it wasn't vengeance that he wanted for his brothers. What he wanted was reconciliation. What he wanted was to come together, which is why he was so willing to forgive them. So saying all of that, when I don't know who I am, I'm not aware of my history as a family, as a people, then someone else can come and tell me who I am, and I have to fight about that because do I really have the knowledge and the ability to correct them? Or do I have to wear whatever label they put on me? Thug, mean person, thief, whatever, illiterate, so whatever kind of stuff they want to call me as a Black man, I gotta wear that if I don't know who I am, right? And that's unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, how things, whether it's spiritually, politically, unfortunately, when what the Bible say, when the wicked won't rule, the people mourn. When the righteous rule, the people rejoice. Unfortunately, when people who have bad intentions get on the mic and start saying evil stuff in order to make people line up with whatever they want to get. When they get that power, they get that scepter, they sit in that seat, and they have not really. It's one thing I love about it, Olga, in the scriptures and do this Bible thing. When God told the children of Israel in Deuteronomy 17, he said, you can have a king, but you're going to have to choose him like this. When you get into the land and you want to have a king, you can. This is allowed, but he must be someone who loves the word. He must be someone who loves the people. He can't exact all kinds of fees and penalties and taxes. He even talks about the undue taxes. He talks about all these things. He has to be someone who's going to, but with great preparation and with nurturing care for the people. Care, Olga, you've been in leadership you're a young woman, but you've been in leadership for a long time. For you, what are some of those characteristics that you have found that have made people either successful or unsuccessful when it comes to being effective leaders?
Bitterness. So they walk around with a chip on their shoulder. The world owes them. The world has made them incapable of moving forward. Anger, when people just have an unpent or unreleased I was going to say, and release the anger. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. So they just can't move on because they're angry at the world. It clouds their judgment. It clouds their ability to make real connections, to be able to really be focused on work. I've also seen an arrogance and a pride because they've been lied to with regards to them being less than. And so they have to make up for it because on the inside, they know that actually, no, I am something, but it's misinformed. And so they elevate themselves to a position in order to overcompensate for this less than attitude and victimhood. Also an inability to just be focused on moving forward. They're still looking for something because, again, one spirit is able to sense that there's something that's missing. And if you don't have a clear sense of identity and purpose, then you spend your time, even if that time is subconscious, you spend your time looking for an answer, looking for identity in the wrong areas. And so that disallows you from being effective at your leadership role.
Two of the greatest leaders, obviously there's way more than two of the greatest leaders in Black American history are the men, both Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington, both born slaves, both who attained their freedom, right? And both who built lasting legacies that over a century later are still here with us. Frederick Douglass as a writer, as a speaker, he was one of the chief abolitionists, of course. Booker T. Washington, the one who founded, or I should say, reestablished Tuskegee Institute. And it was entrepreneur. He the Rosenwald School fame. He and Julius Rosenwald, the Jewish philanthropist, wind up combining this, build thousands of schools across the country for Black children who did not have access to everything. And Olga, so what you're saying, they became amazing leaders who, if they only held on to the bitterness of what they had been through, and my God, they had been through hell, they were able to still move forward, right? And build again, whether it's business, entrepreneurship, education, all of those things. You all do me a favor. What I've done, I've had the honor and the privilege. Shout out to Mr. David Kay. I don't know if he's anywhere around, if he's hearing this right now. David Kay is the leader of what's called the David and Goliath Project in New York. They are the producers of what's called the Superheroes show, where David reached out to me and we began to collaborate. And he heard a couple of my speeches from before, a couple of sermons and everything. He had an idea for some of the things that I shared about superheroes, right? I would tell people that as Black Americans, you've descended from superheroes. You descended from people who had all the odds stacked against them. They called on God. I mean, the songs, the spirituals, the lift every voice and sing, the go down Moses. And there is a long, long legacy that's there. So it has 5 episodes that's out. If you guys don't mind, you go on YouTube, the Superheroes Show. I think there's a link that's on there somewhere that we can put up there. Go ahead and check those out. It's been wonderful doing that with them. We have some other episodes that are coming up, including I did an interview, had an honor of doing an interview with Mr. Ian Rowe there in New York, an education, amazing person. He's over the Vertex Leadership Academy. I hope I'm saying the right. I didn't pull that up here, but Ian, thank you so much again. Looking forward to sharing that with everybody. There is a clip of one, right? So if you're on Instagram and then you are on Clubhouse, you won't hear, but you won't see it, but you will hear it. So I'm gonna ask the producer to show this clip. We did Frederick Douglass. Every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern, it posts on the YouTube page. So if you don't mind, go to the YouTube page on the Superhero Show, click subscribe so that you can. We're still just getting it started, just getting it rolled out. So we're talking about the leadership part, Olga, and there's a part of it. It's about a 7-minute, but this one's about a minute, right? But it's about a 7-minute total. Here's about a 1.5-minute clip. I want you to share that with us, Ray, if you can.
While Douglass is one of the most celebrated and well-known Black American figures of the abolitionist movement, one aspect of his life that is not often discussed is his spirituality and religious piety. Douglass was a very devout man whose faith played an all-important role in his extraordinary journey. He became a Christian at a very young age and was befriended by an older Black lay minister named Lawson, whom Douglass affectionately called Uncle Lawson. In his own words, Douglass explains how Uncle Lawson foretold or prophesied of Frederick's future greatness. The good old man had told me that the Lord had a great work for me to do, and I must prepare to do it, and that he had been shown that I must preach the gospel. His words made a deep impression on my mind, and I verily felt that some such work was before me, though I could not see how I should ever engage in its performance. The good Lord, he said, would bring it to pass in his own good time, and that I must go on reading and studying the scriptures. The advice and the suggestions of Uncle Lawson were not without their influence upon my character and destiny. He threw my thoughts into a channel from which they have never entirely diverged. He fanned my already intense love of knowledge into a flame by assuring me that I was to be a useful man in the world. When I would say to him, "How can these things be, and what can I do?" his simple reply was, "Trust in the Lord." When I told him I was a slave and a slave for life, he said, "The Lord can make you free, my dear. All things are possible with him. Only have faith in God. Ask and it shall be given. If you want liberty," said the good old
right there. And I need to. That clip is about a minute and a half clip from the Frederick Douglass piece. And we have joining us also, while I get into that, the executive director of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, Mr. Joshua Washington, in the house. I don't have those buttons where I can do a lot clap, clap track or nothing like that. But hey, Joshua, you doing? We had just I shared that clip with you all, and again, please, if you want to see the whole thing, go to you on YouTube. There's an Instagram page for it as well. The Superhero Shows, what it's also called, the Superhero Show. You can follow the Instagram page. We put clips on there, but the full episodes are actually from the YouTube page, right? So if you go to YouTube page, if you like and subscribe there. The part that I was reading there, Joshua and Olga, was actually, Joshua, I think you read it before, from Frederick Douglass's autobiography, My Bondage, My Freedom. He gives a testimony of how a minister prophesied to him. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't know for sure. I haven't read the book in a while. He may have been in his teenage years. He may have been 12, 13, 14, somewhere around in there. Frederick Douglass, still a slave at this point. I believe this is around the 1840s or so, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I don't have the book in front of me. Please forgive me. But while a slave, there was again, as I shared in the video, I've just quoted from his actual book. And one of the reasons why we shared that is that when you're talking about the legacy of the Black American community, that's, again, no people are a monolith, right? Nobody's the same, right? But there's an overarching theme, and I touch on this in my book, Zionism in the Black Church, and that is for many of those leaders, whether it was the civil rights movement during Dr. King's time, or Frederick Douglass, or Mary McLeod Bethune, or they Harriet Tubman, they would very openly talk about their faith in God and why that was the impetus for what they did and their hope. Even again from the Psalm, the Negro spiritual, I call it one of the crowning jewel of the Negro spiritual, Lift Every Voice and Sing. It was written as a poem by James Weldon Johnson. Throughout those three stanzas is a deep and abiding faith of a people who had indeed suffered centuries of slavery, right? Not just a couple of years, a couple of decades, centuries, from the 1600s to the 1800s, and then another century of Jim Crow segregation, right? So you have, although Literary Voice and Sing was written before the Jim Crow era in that sense, there was already Jim Crow and Black codes. What I'm saying is that it was written in 1899, but there's a hope, even in the midst of the tragedy. Literally, the words hope and faith and light being in the song, embedded in a people who had suffered great loss, but knew that God would help them, and very much did, as they moved forward, which is why the whole term you've descended from superheroes when we're talking about. In that clip there, young Frederick Douglass talks about the man who prayed for him, prophesied to him, and hey, according to the scriptures, one of the way you know it's a prophet is if the words don't fall to the ground. And he was a young slave at that point who did eventually win his freedom. He fled for a while and was speaking as an abolitionist in the UK and other parts of Europe, right? Came back. Some of his friends helped and purchased his freedom because slavery was still there. And his legacy to this day, our good friends, the Douglass Leadership Institute, Pastor Bishop Dean Nelson, all these wonderful organizations named after this great man who in his own words tells you, as we used to sing back in the day, we've come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord. They had no problem, right, telling people it was God who brought me through, right? Again, became a Christian at a young age, and that was his testimony. And so I wanted to share that with you. Please check that out. on the why is that connected to the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel? Again, our commitment to authentic history, right, and celebrating these great figures of the past, and a quest for me to better understand direction and trajectory and from whence as a community I descended, right? And that's what we're wanting to do there. So yeah, actually, thank you, Mr. Producer, for doing that. Joshua, how you doing, sir?
Good, doing well.
You wrote an article about something else as I go to the last part of it here, about the rising tide of what we're seeing, a lot of Jew hatred and this whole Hitler stuff around young people in the West. I'm gonna give it over to you. There's a piece that was written in Israeli Cool. David Lang, I believe, is the guy who's over Israeli Cool. Talk about this young lady who wrote this, you can't say nothing about the Jews song, and then she winds up putting it on Twitter and everything. Josh, I'm gonna hand it over to you. As you're writing your piece, because you wrote a couple of pieces lately, but one of those I believe was about the whole anti-Semitism. What were you saying in the piece? And the people is that on Jodavi or is it on the app? I think it's on your Jodavi one, right?
I didn't write a piece yet from Jadabi. I just was tweeting about it and sharing some stuff because this
And Maria,
young
put
lady.
that tweet up if you can while he's talking. Go ahead, yes, sir.
Oh yes, yes. This young lady, she's a very big follower of Nick Fuentes, which for those who don't recognize that name, he's a part of the what we'll call the alt-right, the far right, very neo-Nazi. He was on a podcast recently with a bunch of black young people as well, where he was just saying the N-word over and over again, and they were just sitting there letting him do it. A couple of the girls seemed uncomfortable, but in general, he wasn't saying the N-word, but he was spouting all kinds of Holocaust denial, Holocaust revisionism, and they obviously didn't know anything because as he was talking, they would often make comments about how knowledgeable he is and how much they're learning from him and things like that. And so this lady, she's a follower of his, and she loves him a lot, and so she posts a lot of different songs on Twitter that some of them are inflammatory, some of them are just silly or whatever. And she decided to post a video of her singing a song about, she said, those who cannot be named. So she sang a song about it, and again in the song she even questions the evil of the Holocaust, saying, I'm not saying, I'm not saying that it's wrong, but basically saying that we have to ask at least why Hitler would do that, meaning that the Jews had to have done something for him to have killed them in such great numbers. And so yeah, she posted that, and then it got picked up. Obviously, a lot of people liked it. A lot of people, obviously, like us at Ipsy, we condemned it. We posted it and tweeted it. And one thing that I saw, because I posted both from Jadabi Music and from the Ipsy page, because it was music and also had something to do with that. That I saw a lot more response in condemnation of her, at least from my music page, than I usually do from other stuff that I post, whether that's from BLM leaders. For the past few years, we posted stuff that social justice warriors have said, professors have said in colleges, sometimes spouting revisionist history and all that stuff. And so I made a tweet. I tweeted it again, saying that basically there is this growing number of young people, like I said, there's a rising tide of people on both the far left and right who are attempting to repaint Adolf Hitler as some sort of hero and the Jews as some sort of villains, which that tweet kind of blew up. It was over Shabbat, so I wasn't really looking at my phone. I came back, and there was just, there's a lot of debate about that. People were saying that it doesn't exist on the left. There's no one on the left who's cozying up to Hitler or revising history. So I then began to post some things. There are people who espouse anti-white, anti-cop views, who also say that Hitler was right. You're not on the right and anti-cop. That's not a right-wing thing. There is like the Waukesha car ramming. The guy was black. He also had a lot of pro-Hitler views on his thing. So I just then went to a few articles and posted some stuff of stuff I've seen on the other side that, again, seems to be more ignored than what this girl posted is kind of low-hanging fruit. Most people are against white supremacy, and most people are they don't like Nick Fuentes and on the right and on the left. I mean, so that's easy, but it's more difficult to actually call out a professor who's teaching students in college, that whatever they want to teach, wrong history, bad history, repainting communist dictators to be freedom fighters, all those different things. And so yeah, that statement kind of rattled cages, but it's absolutely true, and we're going to see a lot more of it. People, both in Nick Fuentes' camp and people on the other side, who are trying to repaint and retell history.
So somebody was asking me on Instagram who was talking. That's Joshua Washington, the executive director of, there we go. Yep. Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, talking about this latest thing. What's the young lady's name again who sang that song, Joshua, the anti-Semite song?
Pearl
something, huh?
Her handle is Pearly Things, I think.
Right. Okay. And so, yeah, what he was talking about, this, go ahead, Olga. I'm sorry. Were you saying something? Go ahead.
I was just saying it's Hannah Pearl.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And what he was addressing, those of you listening, that's Joshua who was speaking. That he's also, you'll see him there now in Clubhouse as well. He was addressing what we are seeing, not we, just IPSI, we just talk what we're seeing societally, right, as a normalization of anti-Semitism. So, and if you're saying, well, if you're black, why are you about anti-Semitism? You don't understand. First of all, we are an organization that stands with Israel, stands against anti-Semitism and all kinds of hatred, but we're talking about anti-Semitism in this context. And if you understand anything about history, the arc of history, that it's an often used term. It's somewhat, it becomes cliches for some people, but it is true. The Jewish people are the canary in the coal mine. And let me say this too. My wife was somewhere a few weeks ago in a grocery store, and she was talking to someone who happens to be Jewish. He's black. He had his kippah, and she didn't know. They were just having a conversation, right? And she saw, without me getting into all the details, some glares. And it was not at her at first, but the people who started to glare, and it was a real, bad vibe. My wife's a grown woman. She's not tripping. She can handle herself, right? But she noticed that the fact that she was talking to this Jew, he's happened to be a black Jewish person, right? But the fact that she was talking was really bothering a couple of, like, they were cool until it was almost like, why are you talking to that person type of thing, right? And I tell people all the time, this is not a color thing, right? Oh, those white Jews. Nope. I've been doing this long enough to know, ladies and gentlemen, and to see, right? I don't care if they're Jews, whether they're Ethiopian Jews or they may be West African, they may be Persian, whatever like that. For those, anti-Semitism is a spiritual thing. It's such an amazing type of specific hatred. But here's the problem: when it goes unchecked and becomes normalized, you have young people. I mean, I'm old enough to be their parent. They're singing songs about Jew. I'll never forget when our daughter, our fourth child, we have 6 children. Our fourth child, when she was in high school, she's in her 20s now, so this is about 10, 12 years ago. She was in high school because we homeschooled all of our children. When they got to the high school age, we let them choose if they wanted to go to high school. And a couple of them did, a couple of them decided not to, right? And then people go, oh, how are they going to be socialized? That's always a funny thing to me. I'm watching these kids in the school. But anyway, so she comes home one day and she says, Mom, why are Jews funny? And my wife didn't know. She said, what do you mean? She said, what? Because my daughter didn't know how to ask the question. And she kept trying to ask it in a way. She said, what do you mean? She said, well, the kids at my school are telling Jew jokes. Now, mind you, the school she went to, pretty ethnically mixed, but it's probably maybe 60% white, 30% black, or maybe 15% black, 20% Latino, right? You had a pretty, ethnically mixed school there. I'm not naming the school. It's not the school's fault or whatever. But in Stockton, California. And she was saying they're telling Jew jokes. Now, they're telling like Jew jokes. I'm not telling the jokes, right? But the Jews are the like lampshades and stuff like this, the nastiest, most vile. And these kids are 15, 16. why do they know these Nazi era World War II jokes? The kids, their grandparents, great grandparents were alive during the. Some not only have these jokes withstood the test of time, these kids are in school telling jokes about slaughtering Jews. Hee hee ha 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 ha. I'll never forget in Algermina in 2004, and I have this link, Maria. I'll give it to you so you can post it when we're done in a moment. The Rwanda genocide of 1992. I hope I'm saying it the right way. I might be doing wrong. I'm a Maria. There was a piece that was put in Algerminer. The title of it was Rwandan Genocide Scholars Urge Jews to Recognize Iran Threat as Similar to Nazi Regime. It's written by Mr. Joshua Levitt. It's dated April the 1st, 2014. And I'm not going to read it to you because I want to take the time, but suffice to say that in this piece, the survivors of the Rwandan genocide, they were at a conference and they saw Charles Asher Small, who is a academic. He's a professor, and one of my friends works with him and everything. And they were at a conference, and they approached him. He's Jewish, Charles Asher Small is, and they were concerned about the rhetoric. This is 2014, almost a decade ago. The rhetoric coming out of Iran by the mullahs, by the ayatollahs, was very much like what happened to them in Rwanda when the Hutus and the Tutsis, that particular genocide. And they were concerned and wanted to know, was there going to be more of a pushback within the American Jewish community? And they said they felt this kinship because they too had experienced this genocide and they felt this close kinship with their Jewish brothers and sisters. These are Africans who have themselves and their nation seen a genocide, right? And they're watching how the Jewish people in Israel being demonized by the Ayatollahs, who are, as we speak, attempting to build nuclear bombs and destroy Israel and all those other types of things. What's the point that I'm making? That here you have people who have suffered a genocide, so they know what all the things that led up to it, which is the dehumanizing of the people. And they are saying, hey, we're hearing that type of talk. What we're saying is that type of casual Israel shouldn't exist, and the Jews are the problem with the world, and they just need, and Hitler didn't do enough. And this is being more and more normalized, unfortunately, among certain young people. And I say certain, I'm not talking about certain, I'm talking about this young lady, Hannah Pearl, happens to be white, right? White, black. I mean, it's not really ethnic specific, but there is a mindset that's actually there. And any nation, any society, when you see the demonization and the dehumanization of any people, and it starts to gain traction, ladies and gentlemen, those are very, very, very bad signs. Very, very bad signs. Somebody just said on Instagram, where's your Clubhouse group? Okay, so we're going to be wrapping up here in a minute, but on Clubhouse, yes, join our Clubhouse group. It's called the same thing. Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel is the name of our Clubhouse, right? It's abbreviated INST. Institute is abbreviated. Everything else is there for Black Solidarity with Israel. Join our Clubhouse, and you just click on there, and then you'll get the notifications, because we are here each Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, discussing all things Israel, Africa, and Black America, as we have been doing here on today. So those of you who have been asking that question, go ahead and check that out. You can join it right there. Follow us on there. We are being streamed, so you may be watching this on YouTube or on LinkedIn or on Twitter and on Facebook, right? So wherever you're joining us, thank you so much for being with us. We're going to wrap this up here just in a moment. But again, Joshua was talking about that. He's the executive director of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. I am the CEO and the founder. Olga is both the board member and over our speakers bureau, and the COO of Club Z as well. Shout out to Masha. And we are part of the staff that has the wonderful honor and the privilege of doing this work, as well as our IPSI ambassadors. There are a couple of them out there. Shout out to the amazing IPSI ambassador 2022, 2023. Amazing young men and women. We had an amazing 9-month journey, and we're just getting started. For those of you who want to know more about the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, please go to our website, ibsi.org. We have decided as a staff to not immediately launch the next season of the IBSI Ambassadors, but to rather turn our focus on our pastors initiative. It's called IBSI Pastors. It is the clergy version of the Peace Initiative, and we are now taking applications for their 9-month journey. Go to ibsi.org. You'll see Peace Initiative there. Click on that. You can fill out the application. You can send that to us. We will begin doing interviews at the end of this month. So in the next several days, going into next week, a couple of those interviews, I'll probably be in Israel, but that's all right. I'll just get up and we'll do the interviews on Zoom. But again, if you want to know more about that, if you are a pastor, a Black pastor throughout the country, or you know other Black pastors and leaders who would want to know more about our Peace Initiative, please go to ibsi.org, click on there. They can fill out the information. There's also a little video that's there too. You can see, kind of explains what we're doing as well. I think I've covered everything for tonight. I know we could keep going. But yep, there was another part there. So again, I want to remind you to go to also to the YouTube page for Superheroes Show and check out those episodes that are on there as well. Joshua and Olga, are we good, ma'am and sir?
We're good.
Good.
Yes. All right. So I see some of the comments there. Again, thank you everybody for joining us. Again, Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel Forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. I am Dumasani Washington, the founder and CEO of IBSI, joined with Joshua Washington, who is the executive director, Olga Mashwe Washington, who is the board member and the head of the Speakers Bureau. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We're each time. This is going to be, it's always recorded. So I think the stream is going to stay on Clubhouse. It's going to be on the other ones as well. So mark your calendars, join us. We'd love to have you all with us. Again, shout out to Mr. Lonnie Poindexter. I see him out there on Clubhouse, out there on the West Coast. We'll try to cover the whole thing. They also just came back, their group, Every Black Life Matters. They came back from Israel. They were in Nigeria. I got to talk to them. I think I have a meeting, Lonnie, with Miss Regina, who's still in South Africa right now, but we're going to connect on Zoom on tomorrow and touch base and everything. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. Glad that you all could be here. Looking forward to being with you next Monday again. I think we leave Joshua and Olga. You guys going to be headed up. I will be in Israel. If I can log in for a quick moment, I'll give a shout out and everything. But if not, I know everything will be in great hands. All right. So thank you everybody for joining us. Looking forward to being with you all on next week, Monday, 8 p.m. Same time, same channel. Everybody take care now.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.